And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tomorrow morning's flying weather graphic. We've got some VFR here from the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, on up into south central Alaska. In fact, everywhere east and south of the Alaska Range, except for the eastern Copper River Basin. From there, some areas of IFR extending up along the eastern border there to the Brooks Range. More IFR, western central Arctic coast, and some IFR along the Alaska Range and over the Kuskokwim Valley to the eastern Yukon Delta. Not too bad out over the Bering Sea, big area of VFR there from just west of the Pribilofs on down toward Kiska Island. Otherwise, marginal VFR. Southeast coast, IFR up into the southern areas, marginal VFR up to Lynn Canal, Haines, Skagway, and over to Yakutat. And for the afternoon, IFR to the east and southeast, inside waters of the Panhandle, otherwise marginal VFR. Again, up to Yakutat, improving here over the eastern Copper River Basin. IFR still hung up along the Alaska Range here, and some IFR up to the northeast, eastern Brooks Range mostly, and along the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, VFR here, western interior to Bristol Bay. Marginal VFR into the Kuskokwim Delta. Kodiak Island stays VFR, as well as Cook Inlets, the Matanuska Valley areas, Prince William Sound, and IFR just along the north shores of the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, covering Adak and Atka. IFR out west there, pushing into about Kiska Island, and then that band with that front pushes eastward for Wednesday morning, not quite making it to Adak. Marginal VFR for the remainder of the Bering Sea, right up across St. Lawrence Island into Nunivak Island. And some marginal VFR into the southwest interior, as well as the Kobuk Valley, Selawik Valley, Noatak Valley, northwest coast. Shishmaref northward becomes IFR here for the western central Arctic coast. A lot of VFR over the interior for the morning hours, and even the Panhandle showing some pretty good improvement. Northern half at least, VFR, and for the afternoon, marginal VFR takes hold of the entire southeast coast. Again for Wednesday afternoon. And this area of marginal VFR may clip Cape St. Elias, but push into Prince William Sound. Conditions pretty good, though, here over much of the interior until you get up to the Brooks Range. Possible IFR here, western Arctic coast, along mountains and Seward Peninsula. VFR, Norton Sound, same thing. VFR along the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, marginal VFR up to Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, out to Atka, Adak, out to Kiska Island, Amchitka Island as well, IFR. Passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR for the day on Tuesday, mostly IFR for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill improving throughout the day, becoming VFR at some point in the day tomorrow. Rainy, slow improvement there as well, IFR to start and marginal VFR to finish, possibly becoming VFR, but holding up marginal for this at this point in time. Windy, marginal VFR, but to the east there, Isabel Pass, Mentasta, and Tanita, VFR in the forecast. Portage as well, good VFR tomorrow. Chilkoot and White, little marginal. Freezing levels 2,000 feet here, east of the border, down to the North Gulf Coast, across northern Bristol Bay, and then kind of angling back into the southwest coast. And 4,000 feet there, northern Panhandle, 6,000 feet down toward Dixon Entrance, and about 4,000 to 6,000 feet or so out over the western Aleutians. Icing, next front pushing some considerable moderate rime icing into the western Aleutians late tonight, advancing to about Adak tomorrow. Otherwise, icing free here over the eastern Bering Sea. Maybe some isolated icing threats here over the central Tanana Valley, Fairbanks area, and Nenana. Otherwise, pretty good elsewhere. Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, all the way up to the Arctic coast. Jet stream here, we've got northwest flow 85 to 95 knots, and then southerly flow coming up where those two zones converge. Very strong jet there, 130 to 150 knots blowing across the northern Panhandle areas there. And looking at 9,000 feet, stronger winds at this elevation farther to the south, 55 to 65 knots across the Queen Charlotte's, maybe 35 knots out of the northwest there along the coast of the Panhandle. West-northwest, 35 to 40 knots over the southwest interior. and high pressure, light variable winds, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula area. On the backside of that ridge, ahead of this next storm, south flow, 65 knots. Taking a look at 3,000 feet, 60 knots southerlies here, 55 to 60 knots across the western Bering into the Aleutians, 40 knots out of the south as it pushes slowly eastward coming into Atka Island. Light variable winds under high pressure over the eastern and northern Bering Sea, as well as interior Alaska and the Gulf and the Panhandle. Northwest on the light side for the winds, and turbulence-wise, smooth for the southeast coast. No significant turbulence expected over interior Alaska from the Arctic coast all the way down into the Gulf. Maybe some isolated moderate turbulence there for the Alaska Peninsula, and the heavier turbulence will be from about Atka Island westward toward the western Aleutians where the stronger winds are.